They thought she was just another quiet black girl at a rich white school, until she made their golden boy vanish without raising her voice. It all started with the sound of the bell, not the kind that tells you class is over, but the kind that tells you you're not welcome. It was Imani Moretti's second week at Crestwood Academy in Palo Alto, California. She'd transferred mid-year after her mother took a big civil rights case out west. Crestwood was supposed to be a fresh start, a better opportunity. That's what people always say when they don't have to walk the halls. The first day, people looked at her like she wandered into the wrong school by accident. She wore her hair in thick box braids that fell just past her shoulders, edges clean, fresh beads clicking softly when she walked. Her kicks were black and white Jordans, not dress code, but clean, real clean. And that was enough to make her stick out. Is she on scholarship or something? Someone whispered behind her in history class. Nah, look at her last name. I think her dad's some kind of investor, someone else replied. That wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the truth either. Her father was Lorenzo Moretti, the kind of name you didn't say twice in certain circles. Most people thought he ran high-end real estate deals. What they didn't know was that the buildings were fronts and the real money moved underground, clean and cold. But he wasn't the yelling type. He didn't need to be. Lorenzo made people fold with a look. At home, he was different, quiet, protective, especially with Imani. She was his only child, and when her mother worked late at the law firm, it was Lorenzo who made dinner, who tucked Imani in, who walked her to the door and made sure she knew how to watch a room. He never raised his voice. He raised her to think. But none of that mattered at Crestwood. Not to the kids who thought legacy was something only money and whiteness could buy. By her third day, Imani had figured out who ran the school without trying. Chase Bellamy, blonde, tall, wore Letterman jackets even when it wasn't cold, smiled like he owned the place. His dad sat on the school board. His uncle was a senator in Arizona. His world was made of handshakes and dinner galas and ski trips in Tahoe. The first time Chase saw Imani in the cafeteria, he looked her up and down like she'd tracked dirt in on the carpet. You lost? He said with a fake grin. Or did the district bus take a wrong turn this morning? Imani looked at him, didn't blink. No, she said. But you seem surprised someone like me got in. You okay with that? That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Chase was the kind of guy who didn't take well to being challenged, especially not by someone he didn't expect to talk back. The next day, her books went missing from her locker. The day after that, someone accidentally spilled juice on her jacket. By Friday, she was being called Moretti from the block, like it was a joke. Imani kept quiet, not because she was scared, because she was calculating. She'd seen her father do it 1,000 times. Let people talk. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they're safe. But one thing was clear. Crestwood had its own rules. And people like her were only welcome if they stayed silent, smiled when insulted, and disappeared when told. Imani was too much her father's daughter for that. But before she could figure out what to do next, Chase crossed a line he couldn't uncross. It was a Tuesday. Math class had just let out, and the hallway was packed with bodies moving in every direction. Backpacks swinging, sneakers squeaking, voices bouncing off lockers like rubber balls. Imani kept her head down, one earbud in, trying to get to biology without being noticed. But Chase wasn't done playing. He stepped into her path just outside room 212, all smiles and swagger. His friends hung back, watching. Hey, he said, stretching the word like it cost him something. You ever think about straightening that hair? She stopped walking. Excuse me? You'd be a lot prettier if you, did something with it. Might even fit in a little better around here. His friends chuckled. A teacher passed behind them and said nothing. Imani's face didn't move, but her heart started pounding like a drum in her chest. Not from fear, but from restraint. She wanted to say 1,000 things, each sharper than the last, but her father's voice echoed in her mind. Don't let them control the temperature, you said it. So she just looked at Chase, leaned in slightly, and said, I'm not here to fit in. I'm here to stand out. But thanks for the concern. Then she walked past him like he wasn't even there. But Chase couldn't leave it alone. He followed her halfway down the hall and called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't worry, guys. She's not mad. She's just black. Laughter. Not everyone, but enough to sting. That night, Imani didn't say much during dinner, Her mom was still at the firm downtown, going over paperwork on a high-profile civil case. Lorenzo sat across from her, eating slowly, watching her. "You want to talk?" he asked. She pushed some rice around with her fork, shrugged. "I'm fine." "You're not." She rolled up her sleeve. A light bruise was forming on her arm. Chase had grabbed her backpack earlier and yanked it back hard when she tried to walk away. She hadn't even noticed it until she got home. Her father set his fork down. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He just said, "I could make him disappear." Imani looked up, surprised, but he wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. "I could make a call tonight, and that boy's daddy would be on a plane to Europe by morning, trying to protect what's left of the family name. I could shut the school down with one wire transfer, but that would teach you nothing." She didn't know whether to be scared or impressed. "Then what do I do?" she asked, eyes locked on his. "You show him who your father is," Lorenzo said. "Not by name, not by threat. By proving to him that no matter what he tries, he's playing a game you already know how to win." She was quiet. "Use what you've been given, your mind, your presence, your patience. You don't need to strike, just wait. They always tell on themselves." That night, Imani stayed up late. She pulled out her old notebook, her debate notes from her previous school back in Newark. She printed out school policies. She looked at the dress code, the handbook, the faculty directory. She wasn't scared. She wasn't angry. She was focused. Because her name wasn't just Imani Moretti. It was Imani, daughter of Lorenzo. And her silence had just expired. By Thursday morning, the air at Crestwood felt heavier. Imani walked through the school's front entrance differently now. Not with her head down, not dodging eye contact. She walked straight, calm like she belonged there, because she did, whether they liked it or not. But Chase noticed. Of course he did. It bothered him, how she didn't flinch anymore, didn't shrink. He wasn't used to that. People usually laughed at his jokes, nodded at his comments, followed his lead. But Imani, she made him look small without saying a word. And small wasn't something Chase Bellamy could afford to be. So he escalated. It started with whispers, rumors about her father, that he was involved in shady deals, that her mother was only famous because she defended criminals. One of his friends even asked in class if Imani's dad was one of those mob guys from the movies. She smiled, kept her voice steady. "My dad's never been in a movie," she said, "but you can keep watching." The teacher didn't say a word. That weekend, someone made a fake Instagram account using her name. They posted photoshopped images of Imani in places she'd never been, saying things she'd never say, and somehow, it spread. Kids in the hall started looking at her differently. Teachers avoided eye contact. Even some of the black students kept their heads low, like being around her would pull them into the crossfire. But the worst came on Monday. Imani walked into second period to find Chase already sitting in the front row. He didn't usually sit there. He turned to her with a smirk. "You know, you can act all calm and cool, but this isn't your world," he said, low enough for only her to hear. "We all know your kind. You come in loud, act like you run things, and then disappear when it gets hard." Imani looked at him, quiet. Then he leaned in just a little too close. "You don't belong here. You never did." She didn't say a word, just sat down in the seat behind him, took out her notebook, but inside she was burning. After class, Chase was waiting for her just outside the science wing. There were no teachers around, just a couple of students lingering by the vending machine. He stepped in front of her, blocking the hall. "You think you're smart, but you're not smarter than me." "I don't have to be," she replied, "just smarter than you think I am." That's when it happened. He reached out and shoved her shoulder, not hard enough to knock her over, but enough to make her stumble. Her bag hit the floor. Papers spilled out. And just like that, the hallway went quiet. Imani didn't pick anything up. She just stood there, staring at him. That moment got caught on video. A sophomore behind them had their phone out just in time. By the end of the day, it had already been reposted across school group chats. No sound. Just the image of Chase pushing Imani and her refusing to look away. Her father hadn't called. He didn't have to. That night, Imani sat in her room, eyes locked on her laptop screen, reading the school's code of conduct again. She started taking notes. She wasn't going to just get even. She was going to get it in writing. But Chase had one more move to make, and this one would test everything her father taught her. That evening, after the video had made its rounds and the school pretended not to know what everyone was talking about, Imani came downstairs with her laptop under her arm. Her father was sitting on the back patio. No music, no TV, just the sound of a fountain bubbling in the corner and a cigar he hadn't even lit yet. "Papa," she said softly. He turned, gave her the kind of look that spoke louder than words. She sat next to him. "They're not going to stop," she said. "Not unless I do something that matters." He took a long breath, let the quiet settle between them. "I watched the video," he said. Of course he had. He always knew more than he let on. "People think I'm soft," Imani added, staring out into the dark. "They think I'm scared to fight back." "No," Lorenzo said. "They're scared you won't." She didn't understand at first. "They're used to one kind of reaction," he continued. "Anger, yelling, a scene. That's what they expect from you. And when you don't give it to them, you throw off their entire script." Imani exhaled, frustrated. "But what good is staying calm when people keep pushing?" "That's when calm becomes a weapon," he said, "because it forces them to go louder, wilder, until they show everyone who they really are." He turned to face her fully. "You think I built my name with threats? I built it with presence, with control. When people realize you can break them, but choose not to, that's when they lose sleep." She looked at him, unsure. "But it's not working. They still think I'm nothing." Lorenzo leaned forward. "Then you make your name mean something they can't touch. You fight back, but not the way they expect. No fists, no fire, just facts. You walk in that school tomorrow and remind them what you're capable of, not because you're my daughter, but because you're you." He finally lit the cigar. "Let the boy drown in his own noise. You be the silence that swallows him." Imani sat with that for a while. She had always admired her father, but now she saw the real strength. It wasn't in the power he had over others. It was in the control he had over himself. So she got up, went back to her room, and started writing. A formal complaint, complete with timestamps, screenshots of the fake Instagram account, links to the video, and quotes from the school's own policies: harassment, bullying, racially charged behavior, inaction by staff. She wasn't asking for help, she was building a case. By midnight, the email was ready. Addressed to the principal, the dean, the superintendent, and the school board president. She attached it, took a breath, and hit send. But before she closed the laptop, she opened a new tab. She started a petition, calling for a public conversation at Crestwood about bullying, privilege, and accountability. She didn't put her name in the title. She didn't need to. By the next morning, it had over 200 signatures. But Chase wasn't done just yet. And his final mistake? It was going to echo louder than any insult he ever threw. Crestwood Academy was known for three things: its ivy-covered buildings, its college acceptance rate, and how well it cleaned up its messes before anyone outside the gates noticed. But this time, the mess had gone public. By Wednesday morning, the video of Chase pushing Imani had made it to parents' inboxes, community group chats, and even a few local journalists. The petition had crossed 400 signatures and was now getting reshared by alumni with blue checks. Some of them had stories of their own, things that had never made it into official reports. Imani didn't gloat. She didn't even speak. She showed up to school like it was just another day. But the building felt different now. The hallway chatter had shifted. Some students gave her nods, small ones, like silent apologies. Some looked away. Chase's group? They were quieter. Their laughs weren't as loud. Their eyes moved faster when she walked by. In second period, the teacher announced that there would be a special assembly during sixth period in the auditorium. Everyone knew what it was about. Nobody said it out loud. At lunch, Imani sat alone by choice. She needed to think. Chase walked in 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses indoors like he was still in control. He sat at his usual table, but the chairs around him weren't as full. Even his closest friends looked uneasy. Because the thing about people like Chase, they feed on silence. But when the silence starts working against them, they starve. At the assembly, the principal cleared his throat too many times. This school has always prided itself on values of inclusion and lies. He went on and on about investigations, student safety, and community. No names were mentioned, no apologies given. Until Imani stood up. No one expected it. She wasn't on the schedule. She didn't have permission. She didn't need it. "I'd like to say something," she said. The whole auditorium froze. Principal Dobbins looked like someone had yanked the mic out of his hand, but it was too late. All eyes were on her, all cameras too. She walked calmly to the front and stood center stage. "My name is Imani Moretti," she said, "and I didn't come here to make trouble. I came here to learn." She looked out at the rows of faces, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable, some pretending to be invisible. "But since I got here, I've been shoved, followed, mocked, and lied about. And when I spoke up, I was ignored. Because people like me are only welcome in schools like this as long as we stay quiet." Murmurs in the crowd. "I didn't make a scene. I made a case. I didn't yell. I documented. I didn't accuse. I reported. Because the only thing more dangerous than a loud voice is a quiet one with receipts." The auditorium was dead silent now. Even Chase, seated in the back, had taken off his sunglasses. "I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to rebuild the standard." Then she pulled out a folder, her notes, copies of every incident, every name, every policy Crestwood failed to enforce. She handed it to the principal on her way back to her seat. He didn't even know what to say. After the assembly, Chase tried to approach her in the hallway. He looked smaller now. He tried to smile, like maybe they could pretend it never happened. "Hey, look, I didn't mean..." She didn't stop walking. "No need," she said. "You already told the world exactly who you are." But Crestwood hadn't seen the last of Imani, and neither had Chase, because the real lesson was still coming. 3 days later, a white envelope arrived at the Bellamy residence, hand-delivered, not mailed. Inside was a formal letter from Crestwood's Board of Trustees, polite language, legal cushioning. But the meaning was clear. Chase Bellamy was no longer enrolled. The Bellamys kept it quiet. No press statements, no social media drama, just silence. But silence doesn't stop truth anymore. Not in a world with screenshots and forward buttons. The story was already out. Imani didn't post about it. She didn't brag. She just went to school the next Monday like nothing had happened. Because for her, it wasn't about getting Chase expelled. It was about finally being seen. In homeroom, a younger student, Janelle, maybe 12, barely 5 feet tall, walked up to her and whispered, "Thank you," then rushed away before Imani could even respond. In the lunchroom, someone slid her a note. Just 3 words. "Keep walking tall." And when she stepped into debate practice that afternoon, the coach called her over privately. "You ever think about running for student council?" he asked, eyebrows raised. Imani smiled, small and knowing. "I'm thinking about it now." Things didn't magically change. People still whispered. Not everyone clapped. Some teachers avoided eye contact like the truth might stain their collars, but power had shifted. Just enough. Later that week, while walking home, alone, no driver, no guards, Imani saw a familiar car parked 2 blocks from the school. Dark windows, new tires. She slowed down. The passenger window rolled down halfway. Her father. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded to the passenger seat. She got in. "Why are you here?" she asked. "I was in the area," Lorenzo said, eyes forward. "Wanted to see how my daughter was doing." She leaned back against the headrest, exhaled. "They expelled him." "I know," he said. "You're not the only one who reads." They sat in silence for a moment, the engine quietly humming beneath them. She looked over at him. "Did you have anything to do with it?" He turned to her, serious. "No, that was all you." She let that sit for a second. "You could have." "I could have made a call," he said, "but if I had, it wouldn't have felt like this." And she understood. She didn't need his reach. She'd used his lessons instead. "I think you're dangerous," she said. He chuckled softly. "That's what your mother said when she agreed to marry me." Then his voice shifted. "But, Imani, just because you can win like this doesn't mean it's always going to be fair. There are still places where they'll treat you like less. People who'll smile to your face and plot behind your back." She nodded. "I know." He looked at her with pride. "Good. Then don't ever let them tell you who you are." She opened the car door, stepped out onto the sidewalk. "But what if they try?" she asked over her shoulder. He didn't hesitate. "Then you remind them." She walked the rest of the way home with a different kind of weight in her step. Not the weight of being outnumbered or being targeted, The weight of knowing she could stand in the middle of it all and not break, not bend, not run. Imani Moretti wasn't just the girl they underestimated. She was the girl who made them rewrite the rules. If you've ever been made to feel small, out of place, or underestimated, remember this. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight like them to win. Stay calm. Be strategic. Move smart. Because silence isn't weakness when it's focused. It's power they never see coming. Stand tall, speak smart, and remind them who you are.